I have taught at the Vale Corydon Lyceum for 216 years, and I designed the third trial myself. I tell you this so you understand. I am not a man who is easily surprised. I built the drowning room. I know every current in it, every false door, every place a cadet's courage goes to die. When they told me a human had enrolled, I laughed. When they told me she had asked to attempt all 5 trials in a single cycle, I stopped laughing, but only because it seemed rude to keep going in front of the girl's file. Let me back up. You won't understand any of it if I don't back up. The Lyceum sits in high orbit over Vale Corydon, a station shaped like a folded wing, all long corridors and cold light. We train soldiers, not the parade kind, the real kind, the ones who get sent to the edges of settled space where the maps stop meaning anything. My people, the Sethric, have run this place since before the compact was signed. We are a serious species. We do not smile much. Our young come to us soft and we make them hard, and the ones who cannot be made hard, we send home, and that is a mercy even if they never see it that way. The 5 trials are the old heart of the place. Every cadet faces one before they graduate, one chosen for them by the instructors, matched to the weakness they most need to burn out. No one attempts all 5. It isn't forbidden. It's just never done, the way it's never done to walk into deep space without a suit. There's no rule. There's only the fact that you die. Her name was Ren Ayaki. She was small even for a human, which is to say she came up to about my collarbone, and I am not tall for a Sethric. She had dark hair she kept tied back and a way of standing very still that I mistook, at first, for fear. Later I understood it was the opposite. She was the stillest person I have ever watched move. She arrived on a supply hauler, not a proper transport, which told you something about how much the human authorities cared whether she succeeded. No escort, no sponsor, just a girl and a duffel and a data slate with her enrollment stamped on it, standing in the receiving bay while 100 cadets of 9 species pretended not to stare. I was there because I am always there when something interesting arrives, and I could already tell she was going to be interesting. The instructor beside me, Vash, who runs the endurance trial and has the personality of a closed door, leaned toward me and said, 2 weeks. I give her 2 weeks before she asks to go home. You're generous, I said. She heard us. I know she heard us because she looked over, found my eyes, and did the smallest thing. She nodded, like she'd noted us down, like we were a factor now and she'd deal with us later. Vash didn't notice. I did. I remember thinking that one is going to be a problem and being right in a way I did not remotely expect. Here is a thing about the trials that the recruitment materials do not mention. They are not designed to be won. Oh, cadets pass them. Passing and winning are different things, and if you don't understand that distinction, you have already failed the deepest lesson the Lyceum has to teach. The first trial, the one Vash runs, drops a cadet into a collapsing structure with 3 others they've never met and gives them exactly enough resources to save 2. Not 3. 2. The trial isn't testing whether you can save everyone. It's testing what you become when you learn you can't. Most cadets break. Some freeze. A rare few make the cut cleanly, choose their 2 and carry that choice out with them, and those are the ones we graduate, because a soldier who cannot choose is a soldier who gets everyone killed by trying to save everyone. That is the machinery underneath the whole place. Every trial is a lesson wearing the mask of a test. And the lesson is almost always the same, dressed in different clothes. You are not strong enough to fix this, so learn what to do with that. So when this human girl requested all 5, the instructor's council did not think how brave. We thought she does not understand what she is asking for. We assumed she saw 5 obstacles and believed in the way the young and the doomed believe that she could smash through all of them. Humans have a reputation. You have heard it. Stubborn, reckless, allergic to the word impossible. We had all met the type. We had all watched the type die. Instructor Kellen, who chairs the council, called her in to talk her down. I sat in on it because, again, I am always where the interesting thing is. Cadet Aoki, Kellen said. He is a patient man, Kellen, patient the way stone is patient. You've requested all 5 trials. I want to make sure you understand what that means. No cadet has attempted more than one. The trials are not cumulative in difficulty. They are each, individually, at the limit of what a single person can survive. 5 is not 5 times as hard as 1. 5 is a way of dying with extra steps. She listened to all of it. She had this quality of listening that made you feel like your words were actually landing somewhere, being weighed, filed. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I ask what the trials are actually for?" Kellen blinked. "For? What are they supposed to teach? Not what happens in them, what they're for." The room went a little still. It is not a question cadets ask. Cadets ask, "How do I pass?" They ask, "What's the trick?" This one had walked in and asked us to hand her the answer key to the soul of the place on her first week, and the maddening thing, the thing I still turn over, is that she wasn't being clever. She wasn't fishing. She genuinely wanted to know before she began, like a person who reads the whole recipe before they turn on the stove. Kellen recovered well. "That," he said, "is something each cadet discovers for themselves. That's rather the point." She nodded again, that little nod, filed away. "Okay," she said. "Then I'd still like to attempt all 5, but I'm not trying to prove I'm the strongest. I want to say that now so it's on record. I already know I'm not the strongest person on this station." A flicker of something at the corner of her mouth, not a smile but the ghost of where one lived. "I've met Vosh." Somebody laughed, choked it off. Vosh, in the back, did not move a muscle, but I have known him 2 centuries, and I saw the exact instant he decided to make the endurance trial as bad for her as he possibly could. The council granted the request. Of course they did. We are not in the business of protecting people from their own choices. That's the first thing the trials burn out of us, the instructors, long before we're allowed to run one. If a cadet wants to walk into the dark, our job is to make the dark honest, not to lock the door. But I watched Kellen sign the authorization, and I watched his hand pause over the slate, and I knew he was doing the same arithmetic I was. 5 trials, 1 small human. He was signing something he expected to be a death warrant, and he was doing it because refusing would have been a lie about what we are. I want you to hold on to that. It matters later. Everyone in that room, every hard old instructor who'd buried more cadets than they could name, believed with total certainty that we were watching a girl volunteer to die. And we were right about the danger and wrong about everything else, and the distance between those 2 things is the whole story. The first trial was Vosh's, and Vosh had spent 3 days making it worse. I know because I helped him a little, in the way you help a friend dig a hole you're pretty sure he's going to fall into. The collapsing structure scenario, the 2 of 3 choice, he'd tuned the environmental controls to human tolerances, then dialed them down. Colder than a human likes. Thinner air. The kind of conditions that don't kill you but tax you, tax the body, so that every decision gets made through a fog of physical misery. He wanted her exhausted before she ever reached the choice. He wanted her stupid with cold when the moment came. "You're being unfair," I told him, watching him work. "I'm being accurate," he said. "The galaxy is unfair. If she wants to play soldier, she can learn what the job actually costs." He didn't look up from the console. "You think I'm cruel? I'm the kindest man on this station. I'd rather she learn it here, where she just gets sent home, than out there where it kills her and 40 other people." I couldn't really argue with that. It's the argument the whole Lyceum is built on. It's a good argument. It's the reason none of us ever felt like villains doing what we did. She went in at the 3rd bell. They put the observers in a gallery above the trial space, one-way glass, full sensor feed, the whole psychological readout of the cadets scrolling down one wall so we can watch not just what they do but what it costs them. Heart rate, stress markers, the little chemical panic that precedes a person's worst decisions. Ren Aoki walked into a collapsing tower in air too cold and too thin for her, and the first thing she did was stop and breathe. Just stopped. right inside the entry, closed her eyes. Took maybe 10 seconds, which does not sound like much until you are watching a structure groan and buckle around a person and every instinct in your body is screaming move. Her stress markers spiked then. I watched this happen and did not believe it came down. She was regulating, deliberately. She'd walked into the worst place on the station, and the first thing she spent was 10 seconds getting her own body under control, because she understood, in a way we had not expected any cadet to understand, that a panicked mind solves nothing. Then she opened her eyes and went to work. There were 3 simulated cadets trapped in the structure. Vash's classic cruelty, resources for 2. She found the first one fast, a slim humanoid pinned under a fallen beam, and she did not try to lift the beam, which was the trap. The beam was too heavy, and cadets always tried to lift it and burned themselves out, and that was the point. She looked at it, looked at the pinned figure, and instead of lifting, she started clearing the debris that was bracing the beam from a different angle so it settled and rolled instead of pressing. Freed the figure in under a minute. Physics, not strength. She'd read the situation instead of fighting it. Vash made a small sound beside me. She found the second one and the third one close together, both hurt, both mobile-ish, and here was the choice. Here was the whole trial. Resources for 2. One set of the emergency gear that would get someone through the collapsing exit corridor alive. 2 sets, 3 people and herself and the clock. We waited for her to choose. That's the trial. You choose your 2, you carry them out, you live with the third for the rest of your life. That's the lesson. That's what makes soldiers. She didn't choose. She took the gear apart. I mean that literally. The emergency kits are sealed units. You're not meant to open them, you're meant to use them. That's how the scenario is built. She cracked both units open with a tool she'd pulled off the pinned cadet's belt, laid the components out on the shaking floor for 4 whole seconds while the structural warning screamed, and then she rebuilt them. Not 2 full kits, 3 partial ones. She'd looked at what the gear actually did, the redundancies, the safety margins built into each unit, and realized that enough for 2 was only true if you used them the way they were designed. Strip the redundancy, accept more risk, distribute it across 3 and everyone walks. Reduced margin, higher danger, but 3 people breathing instead of 2. She got all 3 out, herself included, with time on the clock. The gallery was silent. Vash was staring at the glass like it had personally insulted him. That's not, he started. The kits aren't meant to, she broke the equipment. She reconfigured the equipment, I said. It's cheating. Is it? I was watching the girl on the feed, kneeling by the 3 simulated cadets in the safe zone, checking each of them with her hands, methodical, gentle. You gave her enough for 2. She found a way to make it enough for 3. What exactly is the cheat? The trial is about choosing. It's about learning you can't save everyone. Then maybe, I said slowly, because I was working it out as I said it, she just failed to learn a lesson that wasn't true. Vash didn't answer. On the feed, Ren Aoki sat back on her heels in the cold and the thin air and let out a long breath that fogged in front of her face. She looked tired. She looked like a person who had just done something very hard. But she did not look like someone carrying a body she'd left behind, because she hadn't left one behind, and I realized that Vash's trial, my friend's cruel, honest, brilliant trial, had just been solved by someone who refused its central premise. She'd cleared it, first of 5, and she'd done it not by being stronger than the trial, but by being unwilling to accept the terms it offered. I should have understood everything then. I didn't. It took me 3 more trials. The second trial belonged to an instructor named Saravi, and it was a very different animal. Saravi's trial is not physical. It is a room and a conversation and a slow strangling pressure that gets inside you. The setup is simple. The cadet is told they've been captured. The scenario places them across a table from an interrogator, a very good simulation, adaptive, patient, who wants a piece of information. A location. Coordinates that, if given up, will result in the deaths of Allied soldiers in the fiction of the scenario. The interrogator is not cruel at first. That's what makes it work. It's reasonable. It offers comfort, then reasons, then doubts. It tells the cadet their side has already fallen. It tells them the information is already known and confirming it costs nothing. It tells them, eventually, over hours, that holding out is not noble, it's just stubborn, and stubbornness has never saved anyone. The trial isn't testing whether you'll give up the coordinates. Most cadets don't, in the end, not the ones we graduate. The trial is testing something subtler. It's testing whether you understand why you're holding out, whether your silence is principle, or just fear of being the one who broke. Because a soldier who holds the line out of ego breaks eventually. Only the one who holds it out of understanding lasts. Saravi is proud of her trial. She calls it the honest one, because there's no violence in it, nothing to be brave against, just a voice in a room slowly making the case that your resistance is meaningless. It has broken cadets who sailed through everything physical. It is very hard to keep believing in a wall when a patient voice spends 6 hours explaining that the wall is imaginary. Ren Aoki sat down across from the interrogator, and the interrogator began, and she listened. She was good at listening. I noticed that the first day. Now I watched her do it under pressure, watched her actually hear the simulation's arguments instead of just bracing against them, and I started to feel something I couldn't name yet, a kind of vertigo. The interrogator ran its openings. Your side has fallen, she said, maybe. It said the information is already compromised. She said could be. It said holding out helps no one. And here is where cadets usually crack or dig in, where they either surrender or wrap themselves in defiance. She said something I have never heard a cadet say. She said, you might be right about all of it. I still won't tell you. The interrogator, which is very sophisticated, adjusted. It asked why. If she agreed it might be pointless, why hold out? And she said, I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but close, she said, because I don't actually know if you're right. You've told me a lot of things. I can't check any of them. You're the only source of information in this room and you want something from me, which makes you the one source I can't trust. So I'm going to act like the coordinates still matter, because the cost of being wrong the other way is people die. If you've lied to me and I stay quiet, I've lost nothing but time. If you've told the truth and I stay quiet, I've still lost nothing but time. There's no version where talking is the safe choice, so I won't. Saravi made a strangled noise beside me. The interrogator kept going. Of course it did. It's built to. It spent, I am not exaggerating, another 4 hours on her. It got personal, it got gentle, it got cruel. It told her she'd die in that room. It told her no one would ever know she'd held out, that there'd be no medal, no story, that her silence would be totally invisible and therefore totally pointless. That one lands hard on cadets. The idea that the sacrifice won't even be seen. It's the loneliest argument in the trial, and it breaks the proud ones, because the proud ones need to be seen. Ren Aoki, hour 5, exhausted, dry-mouthed, said, that's fine, I'm not doing it to be seen. And that was the trial. That was the whole thing Saravi had built her career on testing for, and this human had walked in and demonstrated it not as a breakthrough she arrived at under pressure, but as something she'd apparently already known before she sat down. She's not breaking, Saravi said. There was something almost frightened in it. No, I said. They all break a little. Even the ones who pass, they break a little and then they rebuild. That's the you have to break to understand it. She's not breaking. Maybe she understood it already, I said, before she came. Saravi looked at me. Then what did we just test? I didn't have an answer. I was starting to suspect the answer was nothing. That we hadn't tested her at all. That you cannot test someone for a lesson they've already learned. You can only watch them demonstrate it and call it a trial because that's the word you have. 2 down. She walked out of Saravi's room on her own feet, swaying a little, and asked for water and 8 hours of sleep, and the council granted both, and nobody made a joke this time. The third trial was mine. I have to tell you about mine properly, because mine is where I stopped being a spectator and became, I don't know what to call it. A witness in the older sense. Someone who saw a thing and had to change because of it. My trial is water. I told you, the drowning room. It is a large sealed chamber that floods slowly at first and then not slowly, and the cadet has to get out. That's all. That's the whole thing. Get out of the flooding room. It sounds almost fair compared to the others. It is the cruelest one on the station, and I built it that way on purpose, and I was proud of it, and I need you to understand why before I tell you what she did. The room has 7 exits. 6 of them are real. One of them is not. It's a false door, sealed, a dead end, and it's positioned exactly where instinct tells a drowning person to go. The nearest one, the obvious one, the one your panicking body lunges for. The trial isn't really about swimming or holding your breath. It's about this. As the water rises and the fear takes over, will you keep thinking, or will you let the animal in you choose the door? Because the animal always chooses the false door. The animal always chooses the nearest exit, and the animal drowns. To pass my trial, you have to stay a person while your body is screaming that it's dying. You have to override every instinct that's kept your species alive for 1,000,000 years and think cold and clear in the one situation designed to make thought impossible. Most cadets fail. Not by drowning, we pull them out. It's a simulation of consequence, not of death, but by choosing the false door, by letting the animal win. And when we pull them out and show them the recording, show them their own hand reaching for the dead exit while 6 real ones waited, something breaks in them that needed to break. They learn they are not the master of themselves that they thought they were. They learn fear is a liar and the body is a coward, and neither can be trusted in the dark. It is the most important thing I know how to teach, and I teach it by nearly drowning children, and I have made my peace with that, because the alternative is they learn it somewhere real and don't come back. That's my trial. That's the thing I built and defended for 200 years. Ren Aoki went into the drowning room, and I sat in the gallery, and for the first time in a very long time I was not certain of the outcome. The water started. She stood in the center of the chamber and watched it come up over her boots, and she did that thing again, the breathing, the deliberate stillness, the 10 seconds of getting herself under control before she did anything at all. I had watched hundreds of cadets enter this room. Every single one of them, the instant the water started, moved. Started swimming, started searching, started spending energy. She was the first who stood still, and made her fear sit down before she did one single thing. Then she began to move, and she did not go to the nearest exit. She went to the wall and she followed it, systematically, reading each door with her hands as she passed it, the way you'd read a book in the dark. The water climbed her waist, her chest, and she kept following the wall, checking each exit, not with her eyes, which the churning water was making useless, but with her hands and something else, some patience that should not have been possible while drowning. She reached the false door. I leaned forward. This is the moment. This is always the moment. The false door is the best-made door in the room. It looks more like an exit than the real exits do because that's the trap, the nearest and the most convincing all in one. Every instinct she had would be pointing at it. The water was at her throat now. This is where they all go wrong. She put her hands on the false door. She felt the seams, and she moved on. She didn't even hesitate for long. She read it, understood it was wrong. I still don't fully know how, whether it was the seams or the seals or just some refusal to trust the obvious answer when her life was on the line. And she left the best-looking door in the room behind and kept following the wall, in water up to her chin now, to the next exit, which was real, which was harder to reach and less obvious and real. And she opened it and she got out. With time to spare, always with her that phrase, time to spare. The gallery was dead silent. I realized I was standing. I don't remember standing. And here is the thing I have to confess to you, the thing I've never told anyone the whole of. As I stood there watching this small human dry off in the recovery bay, having beaten the cruelest thing I ever built, I did not feel defeated. I felt relieved. This enormous, unexpected, shameful relief, like a stone I hadn't known I was carrying had been set down. Because for 200 years I had believed my trial taught a true thing, that fear is a liar and the self cannot be trusted. And I had built my whole understanding of what soldiers are, what people are, on the certainty that everyone, given enough terror, chooses the false door, that the animal always wins in the end, and the best you can do is train people to fight a battle they'll usually lose. And she had just walked into my proof and stood still and made her fear sit down and read every door with her hands and left the liar's door behind, and gotten out with time to spare. And in doing so, she had shown me that the thing I'd built my life around teaching was not a law of nature. It was just a difficulty, and difficulties can be met. I had spent 200 years teaching cadets that they would probably drown. She had just shown me I could have spent them teaching cadets how to swim. I sat back down. My hands were not entirely steady. Vash, who'd come to watch mine the way I'd watched his, looked at me and said quietly, "You all right?" "No," I said, "but I think that's correct. I need to tell you about the boy now, because without the boy the last two trials are just more of the same, and they weren't. They were something else. The boy is why. His name was Teele. I'll spell it Tail, it's close enough, and he was a washed-out cadet. Not officially washed out. The Lyceum doesn't formally expel many. But there are cadets everyone has quietly given up on, who drift through the years failing the small tests and never being offered a trial because offering them one would just be a slower way of sending them home. And Tail was the most given up on cadet on the station. He'd failed his readiness assessments 4 times. He froze. That was his whole problem, the thing that made instructors sigh when his name came up. In any situation with pressure, Tail froze, locked up, went somewhere behind his own eyes and didn't come back until it was over. You cannot make a soldier out of a boy who freezes, or so all of us believed, and so Tail had become furniture, a sad fixture, a boy waiting for someone to finally tell him to go home. Ren Aoki, somewhere in her first 2 weeks between trials, had made friends with him. I don't know how. I asked her later, and she just said he was sitting alone. Like that explained it. Like that was a whole and sufficient reason. He was sitting alone, so she sat with him. She'd found the most invisible person on the station and made him visible, and by the time she was 3 trials deep, the two of them were inseparable in the way that only happens between people who have each spent a lot of time being underestimated. I mention this because the 4th trial, when it came, was Vash's other one, the endurance trial, the real killer, the one that isn't about a choice or a room but about a body pushed past every limit it believes it has. And the 4th trial is the only one that can, at the instructor's discretion, involve a second cadet. It's a rare configuration. Vash chose it deliberately. He was still stinging from the first trial, and he'd found her weakness, or thought he had. He paired her with Tail. He did it, I think, believing it would break her. Not physically, he'd learned by then that breaking her physically wasn't going to happen, but here. This. He'd give her a partner who froze, whose failure was certain, and he'd build a trial where her success depended on someone she cared about who would not come through. Let her be strong. Let her be clever. None of it would matter if the boy locked up at the wrong moment, and the boy always locked up. Vash would teach her the lesson the first 3 trials hadn't, that your own excellence cannot save the people you love from their own limits, that some people just can't be carried. It was the cruelest thing I've ever watched him set up, and he set it up out of something that wasn't even malice by then. It was closer to need. He needed the trials to still mean something. He needed there to be a wall she couldn't get over, because if there wasn't, then everything all of us had built our lives on was in question. And Vash was too old and too tired to have his life put in question by a girl who came up to his collarbone. I understood all of that, watching him prepare it. I understood it, and I didn't stop him, and that's mine to carry. The 4th trial was set for the 7th bell. 2 cadets, one of them the strongest person I'd ever watched move, the other a boy who froze. I'll tell you what happened in part 2. I have to stop here, because the next part is the one I've never been able to tell all the way through without stopping, and I'd rather stop on purpose than in the middle. The endurance trial is a course. That's the simplest way to say it. It's a course built into the outer ring of the station, a long, brutal circuit of climbs and crawls and dead weight and cold, and the trial is not to finish it fast. The trial is to finish it at all, because it's calibrated to be just slightly longer than a body can go. The last stretch is meant to be walked on a self that's already spent. That's the lesson underneath it, Vosh's lesson. That the limit you think you have is not the real one, that there's a country past exhaustion where the actual person lives, and a soldier has to have been there once so they know the way back. With two cadets, the course changes. It becomes cooperative and cruel at once. There are sections neither can pass alone. There's dead weight that needs two to move. And there's a final stretch. Vosh built this part special. I watched him do it, where the course narrows to a single point of failure, a place where one cadet has to hold something while the other works, has to hold it under load, under pain, without moving, without freezing, or the whole thing comes down on both of them. He put tail on the hold. He told them the configuration at the start, the way the trial requires. Full disclosure of the mechanics, the trials are honest, whatever else they are. So they both knew, going in, that it would come down to Tail holding a load at the end while Ren worked to clear their exit. They both knew that Tail froze. Everyone knew Tail froze. Vosh had designed a trial whose success depended entirely on the one thing the boy could not do, and he'd told them so to their faces, and that was the cruelty of it, the clean surgical cruelty. He wasn't hiding the trap. He was showing it to them and daring them to walk in anyway. I expected her to object, to ask for a different partner, a different configuration, anything. It would have been reasonable. It would have been smart. She said, okay. And she turned to Tail and she said something to him quietly off mic that I didn't hear and still don't know, and whatever it was, the boy nodded. Once. That small human nod she had, the one I'd first seen in the receiving bay, he'd caught it from her, somewhere in those weeks, the way you catch a person's habits when they're the first one to ever really see you. They went in. I'm not going to walk you through the whole course. It was long and it was hard and they were both wrecked by the halfway point, and none of that is the part that matters. What matters is the end, the narrow place, the hold. By the time they reached it, they'd been going for hours. Ren was moving on that reserve she seemed to have infinite depths of, that stillness converted into fuel. Tail was worse off. He didn't have her training, her whatever it was. He was shaking, gray, running on nothing. And they got to the final stretch, and there was the load, exactly as Vosh had promised. A mass that had to be held in place while the exit was cleared, and it had to be held by Tail, because Ren was the only one who could do the clearing. It needed her hands and her problem-solving, and there was no version where they swapped. Tail had to hold, and clearing the exit was going to take minutes, long minutes, under load, in pain. And if he froze when he froze, everyone in the gallery was thinking when it came down on them. He took the load. I watched his face on the feed. I watched the exact thing happen that always happened to Tail, the thing that had washed him out, the freeze starting behind his eyes, the pressure locking him up, the person retreating somewhere far back inside the boy where the fear couldn't reach him but neither could anything else. I'd seen it a dozen times. It's a terrible thing to watch, a person disappearing inside themselves in real time. He was going. He was freezing. The load was going to fall. And Ren, working on the exit, not even looking at him, started talking. Just talking, low and steady and constant. I couldn't hear all of it. Some of it was instruction, some of it was nothing. Some of it was just his name over and over folded into the stream of words. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't begging him to hold on. She was doing her own work, fast and certain, and pouring out this quiet, unbroken river of words the whole time, an anchor made of voice, something for him to hold on to that wasn't the crushing weight in his arms. And the boy did not come back all the way. I want to be honest about that because the lie would be to tell you her voice fixed him, that love conquered the freeze, that he found some hidden strength. That's not what happened. He was still half gone. He was still shaking, still gray, still mostly somewhere behind his own eyes. But he held. Not because he'd overcome the freeze. Because she'd given him one single thing to do: hold. Just hold, don't think, don't decide, don't face the whole enormity of it. Just hold and listen to my voice. And it turned out that the thing Tail couldn't do was choose under pressure. And the thing he could do, if someone he trusted took every choice off the table and left him only the holding, was hold. He could hold. He'd always been able to hold. Nobody had ever built him a situation where holding was all that was asked, because nobody had ever bothered to understand exactly what his freeze was and wasn't. They'd seen a boy who locked up and written him off. She'd seen a boy who locked up when he had to decide, and she'd built him, right there in the trial mid-collapse, a little world with no decisions in it. Just her voice, and the load, and the holding. She cleared the exit. It took everything. And the whole time the boy held the weight that everyone on the station would have sworn he'd drop. And when she finally got it open and turned and got the load off him and got him through, he came out the other side and sat down hard on the deck and put his face in his hands and shook. And she knelt next to him with her hand on his back, and neither of them said anything, and that was the fourth trial. Vash beside me had gone completely still, not the still of composure, the other kind. He held, Vash said, like he was reading a word in a language he didn't speak. He held, I agreed. I designed that so he'd freeze. He always freezes. I built it around. He stopped. On the feed, Ren was helping Tail to his feet, taking his arm over her shoulders, the two of them staggering upright together. She didn't get him past the freeze. She just worked with it. She made a version of the trial where the freeze didn't matter. Yes, I said. That's not passing the trial. That's she rewrote the trial around him in real time. And I heard, in Vash's voice, the exact vertigo I'd felt in the drowning room. The floor going out from under a certainty 2 centuries old. Because Vash's trial was built on the belief that a person's limit is a fixed thing, a wall you learn the location of by slamming into it. And she just demonstrated that a limit is only a wall if you accept the frame it's presented in. Tail's freeze was an absolute limit in every trial anyone had ever built for him, because they'd all been built on the assumption that a soldier must decide under pressure. Change the frame, make it so he only has to hold, not decide, and the absolute limit turned out to be a specific one. Conditional, solvable, not a wall, a difficulty. 4 trials. 4 instructors who'd each spent their lives certain of a hard truth about people. That you can't save everyone, that resistance requires breaking, that fear owns you, that limits are fixed. And one after another she'd walked into our certainties and shown us they were just difficulties we'd mistaken for laws because we'd never watched anyone meet them. There was one trial left. And by now every instructor on the station knew what was really being tested, and it wasn't her. The 5th trial is the Council's. It doesn't belong to any single instructor. It's the last one, the capstone, and it is different from the others in a way I have to explain carefully. The first 4 trials all have a hidden lesson, and the lesson is some version of accept the hard limit. The 5th trial has no hidden lesson. That's its secret. The 5th trial is the one where we stop teaching resignation and see if any of it took, see whether the cadet, having been taught 4 times that the world is fixed and cruel and can't be fully beaten, will now, in the 5th, correctly identify the one situation where that's actually true and act accordingly. Here's the setup. The cadet is placed in command of a simulated squad in a scenario that cannot be won. It just can't. It's designed with no solution. The enemy force is overwhelming. The position is untenable. The civilians in the scenario cannot all be evacuated in the time available. And the correct answer, the only correct answer, the thing the whole Lyceum has spent 4 trials preparing the cadet to be able to do, is to recognize that it's unwinnable and order a retreat. Save who you can, abandon the position, accept the loss, live to fight another day. That's the capstone. 4 trials teach you that some things can't be beaten. The 5th trial makes sure you can recognize such a thing when it's real, and do the hard, mature, terrible thing of losing on purpose to lose less. It is the most important lesson we teach, and it is the last one, and we put it last because you have to have been humbled 4 times before you're ready to lose the 5th on command. You see the problem. We'd built a final trial specifically to test whether a cadet had absorbed the lesson you cannot always win, and we'd handed it to the one cadet in the history of the station who had just cleared 4 consecutive trials by refusing that exact lesson every single time, who'd made enough gear for 3 when there was enough for 2, who'd held a line for reasons that had nothing to do with whether it could be held, who'd left the drowning door behind, who'd rewritten a trial around a boy's freeze. We taught her nothing, because she'd arrived already disbelieving the thing we teach, and now we were going to put her in the one scenario where the thing we teach is true, where the answer really is you can't win, so lose well, and we had no idea, none of us, whether she'd see it. Because here was the terrible possibility, and I watched it dawn on the council one face at a time in the hours before the 5th trial. What if her whole gift, the thing that had beaten 4 impossible trials, was exactly the thing that would kill her and her whole simulated squad in the 5th? What if the person who never accepts the frame walks into the one scenario that has no other frame, and burns herself and everyone with her trying to solve a thing that has no solution? Stubbornness had gotten her through 4 trials. The 5th trial exists to test whether you know when stubbornness becomes the thing that gets everyone killed. It was, I realized, the perfect trial for her specifically, in a way none of us had planned. It was the exact question her 4 victories had raised. Does she know the difference between a difficulty and a wall? Or does she just see difficulties everywhere, and has she only been lucky that all 4 were? I did not sleep the night before the 5th trial. I don't think any of the council did. We'd stopped being sure what we wanted the outcome to be. Part of me, the 200-year-old part, the part that had built the drowning room, wanted her to fail. Wanted the 5th trial to be the wall, wanted to be able to say, see, there are real limits. The world is as hard as we always said our lives meant something. And part of me, a newer part, a part she'd made in me somewhere between the water and the boy, was afraid of exactly that, was terrified she'd throw herself and a squad against an unwinnable thing, and prove that her gift had an edge she'd fall off of. She went in at the 5th bell. The whole station watched, not just the council, everyone, every cadet, every instructor crammed into every gallery and every feed. Tail was in the front of the observation deck, gripping the rail. It had never happened before, the whole station stopping for one trial. It has not happened since. She took command of the squad. The scenario bloomed around her, the overwhelming enemy, the untenable position, the civilians, the clock, the unwinnable thing. And I watched her do the stillness one more time, the 10 seconds, the fear made to sit down, and then I watched her read it. She read it the way she'd read the doors in the drowning room, hands and patience. She checked every exit. She ran the numbers on the evacuation. We could see her doing it, the feed tracking her attention. She looked for the reconfiguration, the 3rd kit built from 2, the frame nobody else had questioned. She looked for the way through because that's who she was, that's what had beaten 4 trials. And there wasn't one. I watched her find that out. I watched her check and check and check, with that relentless refusal to accept the obvious answer that had saved her 4 times, and I watched the scenario give her nothing back, because there was nothing, because for once we had built a thing with no seam in it. And I understood that this was the actual trial, the real one, the only one that had ever been testing her and not just being solved by her. The question was not whether she could find the way through. The question was what she would do when she truly looked, and there wasn't one. She ordered the retreat. She got her squad up and moving, and she pulled back from the position, and she got out every civilian the clock allowed and no more, and she left the rest, and she did not burn herself and her people trying to save what could not be saved. She looked at the unwinnable thing, and for the first time in 5 trials, she agreed that it was unwinnable, and she lost on purpose to lose less. It should have felt like a defeat. It was the one trial where the right answer was to lose. And I sat in that gallery and watched this human girl order a retreat and accept a loss, and it was the most complete victory I have ever witnessed in 216 years at this station, and I'll tell you why. Because anyone can refuse to accept limits. Cadets do it all the time. It's the most common way they die. And anyone can accept limits, most of the galaxy does. Most people fold at the first hard no and call it wisdom. Both of those are easy. Both of those are frames you can hide inside. What she'd done across 5 trials was the thing almost no one can do. She'd looked at each hard no on its own with fresh eyes, refusing to assume in advance whether it was real. 4 times she'd found the no was a lie we dressed up as a law, and she'd walked through it. And the 5th time she'd found a no that was true, actually true, all the way down, and she'd had the exact same clear eyes for that as for the other 4, and she'd bowed to it. Not out of resignation. Not because she'd been taught to. Out of the same thing that had made her break the equipment and hold the line and leave the false door. A total, patient, fearless refusal to accept anyone's word, ours included, about what was possible, combined with the honesty to see it plainly when she'd found the real edge of the world. That's the thing we'd spent 5 trials and 200 years, and I don't know how many cadets' lives trying to teach. Not never give up. Not know your limits. The thing in between, the thing that has no slogan, the thing that has to be seen fresh every single time because the whole point is that you can't decide in advance. Look at the wall with your own eyes before you either climb it or bow to it. She'd had it when she walked off the supply hauler. She'd always had it. We hadn't taught her a thing. She'd taught us. She cleared all 5, with time to spare every one. The records show it plainly, and the records are the least true thing about what happened, because cleared all 5 makes it sound like she was stronger than our trials, and she wasn't. She was clearer than them. There's a difference, and I've spent the years since trying to build trials that teach the difference, and it is the hardest thing I've ever attempted, and I'm not sure I've managed it once. Here is what I remember most, though, not the trials, the after. When she came out of the 5th trial, the whole station was silent. And then it wasn't, I've never heard a sound like it. This crash of noise from every gallery at once, cadets and instructors both. And she came out into the corridor swaying, gray with exhaustion, having done in one cycle what no one had done in the history of the Lyceum. And she didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the council. She didn't look for me, or Vash, or Saravi, or any of the hard old instructors whose life's work she'd just quietly dismantled. She looked for Tail. She found him in the crowd, the boy everyone had given up on, the boy who'd held the load, and she crossed the whole corridor to him through all that noise, and she didn't say anything grand. I was close enough to hear it, and it wasn't grand at all. She just said, "You held." And the boy who froze, the furniture, the fixture, the one we'd all quietly written off, he stood up straight and he said, "I held." Like it was the first true thing anyone had ever let him say about himself. That's the part I stop on. Every time I tell this, that's where I stop, and I've never been able to get past it cleanly, and I've stopped trying. 5 impossible trials. The strongest cadet the station ever saw. And the only thing she wanted, coming out the other side of all of it, was to find the person everyone else had thrown away and tell him he'd been strong too. Tail didn't wash out. He serves now, out on the edges where the maps stop meaning anything, and by every report he's steady as stone, because it turns out a man who can hold when someone he trusts takes the deciding off his shoulders is exactly the man you want holding the line. He writes to me sometimes. He signs the letters with that little nod, drawn at the bottom of the page, a habit he caught from her and never lost. She graduated, of course, went out to serve. I heard she was extraordinary, and I heard she never once mentioned the 5 trials to anyone, and both of those things sound exactly right. I still run the drowning room. I changed it, though. There's still a false door. But now when I pull a cadet out who chose it, who let the animal win, I don't show them the recording to break them anymore. I show them something else. I tell them about a small human who stood still in rising water and made her fear sit down, and I tell them what she taught a 200-year-old man who thought he knew everything about how people drown. That the false door only wins if you believe, before you've even looked, that you're the kind of thing that drowns. She looked first. She always looked first. That was the whole of it, the entire secret, the thing 5 impossible trials couldn't teach because you can't teach it. You can only be it or learn to be it, one honest look at a time. She looked at every wall we built and asked it, without fear and without hope, only one question: are you real? And she believed the answer, whatever it was. I've tried to live like that since. I fail most days, but I look now before I climb or bow. I look first. We all do, the ones who watched. It's the only thing she left us, and it's the only thing worth having, and I think she'd be embarrassed that I've made it sound so large, and I think she'd tell me to stop talking and go check the water levels, and she'd be right. She was usually right. That's the story. That's the human girl who cleared 5 impossible trials with time to spare. And the thing none of the recordings will ever show you is that she didn't beat a single one of them. She just refused, kindly and fearlessly and all the way to the end, to be afraid of a wall before she'd touched it. We built her 5 impossible things. She looked at each one and asked if it was true, and only 3 of the 5 had the decency to lie.